A photo can look like the most ordinary thing in the world. A couple smiling in front of a van, some random dating profile. You glance at it and move on. Nothing worth a second thought. But a few of these images carry a story you'd never catch the first time around. A murder about to happen, a body that went decades without a name. These are 20 real photographs, and every one of them is hiding something. Once you know what's behind them, you'll never look at a photo the same way again. Welcome back to another video here on History in Focus. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button so you don't miss more videos like this one. Now, let's get into it.
Number 1. This photo shows a man in the shower looking straight into the camera. An intimate image like so many others taken by a couple in love. The man is Travis Alexander, 30 years old, a salesman living in Mesa, Arizona. The person taking the pictures was his ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias, on the afternoon of June 4th, 2008. It started as a racy photo session between the two of them, but minutes after that shower photo, she picked up a knife, and the camera kept on recording what came next. That same afternoon, the two of them had already taken a series of sensual photos of each other. Around 5:30 in the evening, the images change tone. Travis appears collapsed on the floor, bleeding. One of them captures Jodi's leg right beside his body. They were accidental shots fired off by the camera itself during the attack. Travis was stabbed nearly 30 times and shot in the head. Afterward, Jodi tried to make the evidence disappear. She threw the camera into the washing machine and started a wash cycle. Travis's body was not found until 5 days later, in the shower at his house, already decomposing, by friends who thought it was strange that he had vanished before a trip he had planned. The police found the camera left behind inside the washing machine. Even after a full wash cycle, the memory card had survived. Forensic technicians recovered the deleted photos, every one of them stamped with a date and a time. That built the exact timeline of the crime. And it destroyed the defense Jodi would go on to invent over the following months. Jodi Arias changed her story 3 times over the course of the investigation. First, she said she had not even been at the house that day. Then she claimed 2 masked men had broken in and killed Travis. Finally, she argued that she had acted in self-defense. The time-stamped photos proved she had been there, alone with him, at the exact moment of his death. There was also her handprint in blood on the wall, and a bullet of the same caliber as a gun that had gone missing from her grandparents' house a few days earlier. In 2013, Jodi Arias was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The trial dragged on for months and became one of the most watched of the decade on American television. In the end, the piece of evidence that put her behind bars was not a witness, and not a confession pulled out of her. It was a camera she tried to drown in a washing machine herself, and that refused to forget what it had just recorded. Number 2, the perfect family on Facebook. Here we see a smiling couple and 2 blonde little girls, the portrait of a happy family in a quiet Colorado suburb. Shanann Watts posted images like this constantly for her friends and called her husband Chris her safe harbor. On August 13th, 2018, in the town of Frederick, that same man strangled his wife, who was pregnant, and suffocated both of his daughters, ages 4 and 3. The cheerful photos hid completely what was about to happen. Chris Watts was 33 years old and worked as an operator for an oil company. Behind the model marriage, he was carrying on a hidden affair with a co-worker. The doorbell camera at the house recorded Shanann arriving home from a trip around 2 in the morning, still alive. A neighbor's camera caught Chris, only a few hours later, carrying heavy loads out to his truck at 5:17. He was taking the bodies of his wife and daughters to the oil company property where he worked. Chris dumped Shanann's body in a shallow grave dug into the ground. His 2 daughters he pushed into oil storage tanks. Then he went back home and started behaving as if nothing had happened. He even gave an interview to a local television station pleading for his family to come back, his voice cracking right in front of the cameras. His answers did not line up with each other. Investigators realized very quickly that this distraught man knew exactly where all 3 bodies were. Cornered by the evidence piling up against him, Chris tried one last play. He said Shanann herself had killed the girls in a fit of rage, and that he, in a burst of anger, had killed her. Except the autopsy told a very different story. Both girls had been suffocated, and the older one had defensive marks, a sign that she had fought for her life. He had no version left to stand on. In November of 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty. Chris Watts received 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. His wife was pregnant with a boy, and the couple had already decided to name him Nico. After the crime, thousands of strangers began combing through Shanann's old Facebook, studying every smiling photo for signs. All of them were still there, exactly the same. The portrait of the perfect family had not changed at all. What changed was what we knew about the man standing in the middle of it. Number 3. Children play in a clearing carved out of the jungle in Guyana, in South America. At first glance, it looks like any hippie commune of the 1970s. It was Jonestown, the settlement of the religious group called the People's Temple, led by the American preacher Jim Jones. On November 18, 1978, more than 900 of these people died on the same day, in the same place. 304 of them were children. Jim Jones founded the People's Temple in the United States back in the 1950s and drew in thousands of devoted followers. Fleeing the growing scrutiny of the press, he moved the entire group to Guyana to build what he called a socialist paradise. On the inside, though, Jonestown operated like an isolated labor camp, with reports of abuse and of people held there against their will. Rumors that Jones was already rehearsing a mass death began reaching the United States. In November of 1978, the American Congressman Leo Ryan traveled to Guyana to investigate the reports in person, bringing journalists and relatives of members along with him. The visit even started off well, but on the day of departure, a few followers approached and asked to leave with him. Jones could not stand the idea of people walking away. When Ryan and his group reached the airstrip at Port Kaituma, armed men from the temple opened fire. The congressman and 4 other people were killed right there. Back at the camp, Jones gathered everyone in the central pavilion and ordered what he called revolutionary death. His followers prepared large containers of fruit drink mixed with cyanide. The children went first, many of them at the hands of their own parents. Some adults drank willingly, others were forced at gunpoint by armed guards. Within a few hours, more than 900 bodies covered the ground of the commune. Jim Jones was found dead with a gunshot wound to the head. Until September 11, 2001, that was the largest loss of American civilian life in a single, non-natural event in history. There is a photograph of Jim Jones taken on that very last day, standing beside an unidentified man. Shortly after pressing the shutter, the photographer who took that image was killed in the ambush at the airstrip. The pictures of families building a dream in the jungle became the record of the largest mass death ever orchestrated by one man. Number 4. The photos show a young, good-looking couple living out of a van, stopping at national parks and smiling for the camera all across the United States. Gabby Petito, 22 years old, documented every stage of it on Instagram and YouTube alongside her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, who was 23. The trip had started in July of 2021 and was supposed to last 4 months. The images projected a free and happy life. Off camera, though, the relationship was something else entirely. On August 12, 2021, in the town of Moab, Utah, someone called the police saying they had seen Brian hitting Gabby in the street. The body camera of the responding officer recorded her crying hard, saying the 2 of them had been fighting. In the end, neither of them was arrested, and they continued the trip together. Gabby's last post on Instagram was on August 25th. After that, only silence. Around August 27th, she was killed in the Bridger Teton Forest in Wyoming. Brian Laundrie came back alone, driving the van, to his parents' house in Florida around September 1st. He refused to say a single word about where Gabby was or what had happened. Her family filed a missing person report on September 11th. The case exploded on social media and turned into a nationwide manhunt. On September 19th, Gabby's remains were found in the Grand Teton area. The cause of death was blunt force trauma and strangulation. While the entire country was searching for answers, Brian Laundrie disappeared from his house without telling anyone. He was gone completely for more than a month, while police combed Florida looking for him. On October 20th, 2021, his body was found in a nature reserve. The cause of death was a self-inflicted gunshot. Beside the body, investigators found a notebook. Inside it, Brian had left a written confession taking responsibility for Gabby's death. The FBI concluded that Brian Laundrie was the only person directly involved in the death of Gabby Petito. The photos and videos from the dream trip are still online, with millions of views to this day. On camera, the couple looked carefree and on top of the world, living exactly what a lot of people imagine for themselves. The real timeline tells the opposite story. Every beautiful stop along the road was one more day of a journey that would end with her dead, alone in a forest. Number 5. The dating profile photos show a cultured, well-dressed, friendly man. Miguel Cortez Miranda was a chemist trained at one of Mexico's leading institutes, spoke 3 languages, wrote poetry, and even attended marches against gender violence. In the photos, the portrait of the perfect match. Underneath that profile on Tinder was a serial killer of women who had been killing for more than 10 years without raising a single suspicion. On April 16, 2024, Miguel entered the apartment of his downstairs neighbor, a 17-year-old named Maria Jose. The girl's mother, Cassandra, had just stepped out for a few minutes to take care of something. When she came back, she found Miguel standing over her daughter's body. In a panic, he lunged at Cassandra, stabbing her in the neck and back. Her screams alerted the neighbors, who managed to subdue Miguel before he could get out of the building. When police entered Miguel's apartment, the case changed size completely. Scattered around the place were identity documents belonging to about 20 different women. And it did not stop there. 5 human skulls, a handsaw, a box with bones and coagulated blood, and journals in which he described his own crimes. The evidence pointed to victims going back to 2012. According to investigators, Miguel dissolved part of the bodies in acid from the laboratory where he worked. Once locked up, Miguel would call the victims' families from jail just to mock their grief. To Maria Jose's sister, he said he had killed more than 30 women and that he regretted absolutely nothing. On April 13th, 2025, on the exact day he was due in court for a hearing, he was found unconscious in his cell and died at the hospital. He was never convicted. He took to the grave the real count of how many women were drawn in by those profile photos. Number 6. The photo shows a young woman dressed as a vampire at a Halloween party, surrounded by people smiling and having a good time. It is Meredith Kircher, a 21-year-old British student on an exchange program in the city of Perugia, in Italy. The image was taken on the night of October 31st, 2007. In it, Meredith looks relaxed and happy, without a care in the world. It would be the last photo of her alive. The next day, she was found dead inside her own bedroom. Meredith was killed on the night of November 1st, 2007. She had been sexually assaulted and her throat had been cut. Italian police quickly arrested her American housemate, Amanda Knox, who was 20, and her boyfriend, Raffaele Solicito. Under a long interrogation, Amanda went so far as to accuse the owner of the bar where she worked, who was arrested and later completely cleared. The investigation started off crooked from the very beginning and only got worse from there. The DNA and fingerprints left in the bedroom led to a third name, Rudy Guide, a man born in the Ivory Coast who was living in Perugia. The physical evidence placed him inside the crime scene. Guade was tried in a separate proceeding, convicted in 2008 and sentenced to 30 years, later reduced to 16. He ended up leaving prison in 2021. Even with all of that, prosecutors insisted that Amanda and Raphael had been accomplices in the murder. Amanda and Raphael were convicted in 2009, acquitted in 2011, and then convicted again, in absentia, in 2014. The case became one of the most televised trials in recent history, followed all over the world. It was not until 2015 that Italy's highest court closed the saga for good, declaring the two of them innocent and pointing to serious failures in the investigation. Amanda Knox had spent nearly 4 years in prison for a crime the courts ultimately said she did not commit. Amanda went back to the United States and became an advocate for people who have been wrongfully convicted. Rudy Guidi remains the only person definitively tied to the crime scene to this day. In that Halloween party photo, a 21-year-old girl smiles in costume with no idea that this would be the image to follow her to the end, until it became one of the most debated murder cases in the entire world. Number 7. These photos show young women smiling for the camera, ordinary portraits from the 1970s with the hairstyles and clothes typical of the era. The person pressing the shutter on all of them was Rodney Alcala, an amateur photographer who had studied fine arts. The detail that changes everything. Alcala was a serial killer, and to this day, nobody knows how many of the women in those photos were his victims. Many of them were never even identified. Rodney Alcala became known as the dating game killer. In 1978, he appeared on an American television dating game show and actually won his round. Nobody in that studio had any idea that the charming bachelor had already killed several women. Alcala used his camera as bait, offering to photograph his future victims. He was convicted of several murders, but police suspect the real number comes close to 130. In 1979, during the investigation into the murder of a girl who was only 12 years old, police found a storage locker rented by Alcala in the city of Seattle. Inside it were more than 1,000 photographs of women and children, many of them in intimate poses. The investigators' fear was clear and direct. How many of those people were still alive? In 2010, police released more than 100 of those images to the public, asking for help identifying the people in them. The appeal worked, at least in part. In 2013, a relative recognized Christine Thornton, missing since 1977, in one of the photos from the archive. DNA eventually confirmed it. She was one of the victims, and the image had been taken very close to where her body was found. Rodney Alcala died on death row in 2021. The other photos are still out there, faces without names. Every smile in that archive could be the last record of someone nobody ever went looking for. Number 8. This photo is of a newly married Indian couple, him in a suit, her covered in ornaments, the apparent beginning of a life together. Raja Raghuvanshi, a 29-year-old businessman from the city of Indore, married Sonam in a marriage arranged by their families on May 11, 2025. In the footage, just two happy newlyweds. What nobody there could see is that, at that very moment, the bride had already planned her own husband's death. A week after the wedding, the couple traveled for their honeymoon to Meghalaya, an isolated mountain region in northeastern India. The two of them descended thousands of stone steps to visit the famous living root bridges and spent the night in a small village. On the morning of May 23rd, They began the long climb back up to the main road. Somewhere along the way, something went terribly wrong. Raja and Sonam simply disappeared. On June 2nd, a drone located Raja's body at the bottom of a deep gorge near a waterfall. His throat had been cut. His jewelry, his wedding ring, and his wallet were all gone. The bride, Sonam, was still missing, and the family had begun to fear that she had been abducted by the killers as well. Then on June 9th, Sonam turned up alive at a police station. Not to report anything as a victim, to turn herself in. According to police, Sonam had been carrying on a long-running affair with a co-worker named Raj Kushwaha. Instead of refusing the marriage her parents had arranged, she and her lover allegedly hired 3 men to kill Raja during the honeymoon. The plan was reportedly put together about 11 days before the wedding itself. All of them were arrested. That wedding video was not recording the beginning of a union. It was recording the final performance of one, with the death already scheduled. Number 9. The image shows 7 astronauts smiling in blue flight suits, posing proudly with their helmets in hand. It is the crew portrait of the Space Shuttle Challenger, taken before the launch, scheduled for January 28, 1986. Excited people, proud of what they were about to do. Among them was a teacher who was going to become the first civilian in space. 73 seconds after liftoff, all 7 would be dead, live in front of the entire country. What made that flight special was Krista McAuliffe, a school teacher from New Hampshire, chosen out of thousands to be the first educator to go to space. NASA turned the launch into a national event. Millions of children stopped to watch it live in their classrooms because a teacher just like theirs was about to lift off. The morning at Cape Canaveral was abnormally cold, with ice on the launch platform. Even so, the launch was approved that morning. The Challenger climbed into the blue sky, and for a little over a minute, everything looked perfect. At 73 seconds, it turned into a fireball, and the smoke split into 2 crooked columns across the sky. The grandstands went silent. A lot of people took a while to understand that this was not part of the show. The cause was a rubber sealing ring that stiffened in the cold and failed, letting hot gas escape from the rocket. Engineers had warned about exactly this the night before. All 7 died. Among them, the teacher, Krista McAuliffe. Worse still, the crew cabin may have survived the initial breakup before plunging into the ocean, which makes the whole thing even darker. The American space program sat grounded for nearly 3 years after the disaster. An entire generation remembers exactly where they were that day, and that photo of the 7 of them smiling, taken shortly before, became the portrait of a morning that started like a celebration and ended in tragedy on live television. Number 10. The photo shows a dark-haired girl inside a ruined barn. In a dress and high heels, her hands raised like someone trying to fend off an attack. The person who took the photo was Robert Ben Rhodes, a truck driver who became known as the Truck Stop Killer. The girl's name was Regina Walters, and she was only 14 years old, and the photo was taken shortly before he finally killed her. Rhodes drove the highways of the United States and had turned the cab of his truck into a mobile torture chamber. He is suspected of having killed dozens of victims over roughly 15 years. In February of 1990, Regina ran away from home in Texas with her 18-year-old boyfriend, the 2 of them heading for Mexico. Along the way, they accepted a ride. Rhodes killed the young man shortly afterward and held Regina captive for weeks, torturing her inside the truck. Rhodes cut Regina's hair, dressed her, and photographed her inside an abandoned barn in the state of Illinois. Shortly after, he strangled her with a wire. Her body was not found until September of 1990 by a farmer who climbed into the loft of his own barn to take one last look around. Rhodes was already in custody by then, caught at a routine traffic stop with a woman handcuffed in his cab. The barn photo, found at his house, was what put him away for life. Number 11. The footage shows perfectly ordinary men and women, calm and smiling, talking to the camera with the serenity of people about to leave on vacation. They are members of the Heaven's Gate cult, recorded a few days before all of them died. Nothing in their faces or their voices gives away what was coming. On March 26, 1997, 39 of these people were found dead in a mansion in California. The cult was led by Marshall Applewhite, a former music teacher who claimed to be a messenger from a higher level of existence. He convinced his followers that an alien spacecraft was traveling hidden behind the Hale-Bopp comet, which was passing close to Earth that month. Leaving the body, he told them, was the only way to board it. The members took phenobarbital with vodka and covered themselves with purple cloths, all of them in identical clothing and the same Nike sneakers on their feet. The deaths happened over the course of 3 days in groups. Police only arrived after a former member received the farewell tapes in the mail and raised the alarm. Inside, they found 39 bodies laid out in order, covered in purple, with the identical sneakers showing underneath. What is most shocking is the tapes. Hours of people smiling, at ease, calmly explaining why they had decided to end their lives. That serenity is exactly what makes the case chilling to this day. Number 12. A young, elegant brunette with the same look as so many young women who dreamed of Hollywood in the 1940s. This is Elizabeth Short, 22 years old, who had moved to Los Angeles chasing a shot at the movies. In the portraits, just an aspiring actress like so many others, on January 15th, 1947, her body was found abandoned in a vacant lot, and the brutality of the crime shocked the entire country at the time. Elizabeth's body was found by a woman walking with her small daughter on an ordinary morning. It was completely naked, positioned on the ground deliberately, and cut in half at the waist. There was nothing comparable to the brutality of that scene. The press quickly nicknamed the victim the Black Dahlia, and the case took over the newspapers for weeks. Elizabeth had been working as a waitress while waiting for the chance in the movies that never came. The Los Angeles police had dozens of suspects over the years that followed. Plenty of people even falsely confessed to the crime, just chasing a little attention. Theories about the killer were never in short supply. One of them appeared in a book in which a former police officer accuses his own father, a doctor in the city, of having killed the Black Dahlia. None of those threads ever resulted in a formal charge. The Elizabeth Short case went on with no answer at all, year after year. Nearly 8 decades later, the Black Dahlia case remains one of the best-known unsolved crimes in the entire history of Los Angeles. The glamorous portraits of Elizabeth, taken back when she still dreamed of the movies, became the defining face of the case. And there is the most bitter irony in the whole story. That young woman dreamed of being remembered on the screens of Hollywood. She ended up remembered for one of the most brutal and unsolved deaths in the history of the city. Number 13. The photo shows Judy Ann Dull, 19 years old, an aspiring model posing for the camera in Los Angeles in 1957. It looks like an ordinary shoot with a pretty young woman trying to make it in the big city. But the person behind the camera was Harvey Glattman, a man who passed himself off as a photographer for detective magazines. He had lured Judy in with the promise of a well-paying job. A few hours after that session, she would become the first victim of a serial killer. Glattman told the models he needed them tied up and looking terrified to illustrate the cover of a true crime magazine, and he promised a good fee for the session. That is how it went with Judy. He photographed her tied up inside the apartment, then drove her out to the desert and strangled her. Over the following months, he ran the same con on 2 more women, Shirley Bridgeford and Ruth Mercado, drawn in through advertisements and through a dating club. The 4th victim he went after managed to fight back. Lorraine Vigil struggled inside the car, wrestled the gun out of his hands, and held him at gunpoint until police arrived. In October of 1958, Glattman ended up confessing to everything. At the hearing that determined his sentence, 22 photographs he had taken himself of his terrified victims were presented. He was executed in the gas chamber in 1959. The images he made as trophies were the same ones that sent him to his death. Number 14. The personal albums of the Russian imperial family show completely ordinary domestic scenes. Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children out on walks, at the beach, and in unremarkable everyday moments. They are portraits of an ordinary family, except this was the most powerful royal family in Russia. In July of 1918, that same family was led down to a basement under the pretext of having a photograph taken, and they were shot right there. After Nicholas II abdicated the throne in 1917, the entire family was placed under house arrest. They were moved from palace to palace until they ended up at the Ipatiev house in the city of Yekaterinburg under Bolshevik guard. The windows were kept covered and contact with the outside world was cut off. On the night of July 16th into the 17th, 1918, the guards woke the family and told them they were being moved somewhere else for their own safety. First, they asked them to come downstairs for a photograph. The photograph excuse was meant to disprove rumors that the family had escaped. Nicholas, Alexandra, their 5 children, and 4 servants went down and arranged themselves in the basement of the house, except there was no camera waiting for them. A group of armed men suddenly walked in and opened fire on all of them. A few managed to survive the shooting and were then killed with bayonets. The bodies were taken to a nearby forest, covered in acid and partly burned, in an attempt to erase any trace of them. For decades, the fate of the family stayed wrapped in rumors of possible survivors. The remains were not found near Yekaterinburg until 1979 and were not revealed to the public until 1991. The personal albums managed to make it out of Russia. What is left are the ordinary photos of a family and the trap of a photograph that was never actually taken. Number 15. The image shows a farm vehicle crossing the tracks, captured from the perspective of the train itself. It was not taken by someone standing beside the road. It was recorded by the camera of train SE9 on Vietnam's main railway line an instant before the collision. It was April 12th, 2026. Inside the vehicle were a 59-year-old man and his 2 grandchildren, ages 10 and 12, crossing at an unauthorized level crossing. The vehicle drove onto the tracks through an improvised crossing, the kind opened up by local residents themselves, with no barrier and no audible alarm. Train SE9 was coming down the line at high speed. The engineer had no way to stop in time. The impact threw the vehicle and its occupants dozens of feet. The 10-year-old child, who was riding in the back of the vehicle, died instantly. The grandfather and the other grandchild were seriously injured and taken to the hospital. Vietnam sees dozens of similar accidents every year, almost always at level crossings without any protection at all. Most of the crossings in the country have no barrier, no guard, and no audible signal to warn of an oncoming train. The train's camera turned a tragedy of a few seconds into a permanent record. What looks like just a vehicle crossing the tracks is, in reality, the last image of a living child, seen through the eyes of the machine that struck them. Number 16. The Farm Family. The portrait shows an ordinary rural family from Bavaria, farmers posing the way people did in the early 1900s. Nothing strange at first glance. This was the Gruber family, owners of an isolated farm called Hinterkaifeck in the German countryside. On March 31st, 1922, all 6 people living in that house were killed with blows from a mattock. And the killer had spent days hiding in the attic of their house. In the weeks leading up to the crime, strange things had been happening around the farm. Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, found footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the house, but none of them leading back. He heard footsteps coming from the attic and found nobody up there. A newspaper turned up in the house that he had never bought. Keys started going missing. The previous maid had left saying the place was haunted. Nobody took the signs seriously until it was too late. On the night of the crime, 4 members of the family were lured one by one into the barn and killed inside it. Back in the house, the killer also murdered the maid, who had arrived to start work that very day, along with the 2-year-old boy and the grandparents, ages 63 and 72. After killing all of them, the person responsible did not run. He stayed on the farm for days, feeding the cattle and lighting the kitchen stove while the bodies rotted inside. The bodies were not discovered until April 4th, when the neighbors grew suspicious that the whole family had vanished. The mattock used in the crime was found in the barn on the property. More than 100 years later, nobody knows who killed the Grubers or why. In 2007, students at a police academy actually identified a likely suspect, but refused to release the name because of living descendants. The peaceful portrait of that family holds all of it underneath. Number 17. The photo shows an ordinary American family, a couple and their 3 teenage children, all neatly dressed, the portrait of a respectable home in New Jersey. The father is John List, an accountant and Sunday school teacher, known in the neighborhood as an upright religious man. In the photos, the model family. On November 9th, 1971, that same man killed his wife and his own mother and then his 3 children. Once that was done, he vanished off the map. List planned every step with an absurd coldness. He drove the children to school in the morning, went back home and killed his mother and his wife. Then he killed the children one by one as they came home. He laid 4 of the bodies out in sleeping bags in the ballroom of the 19-room mansion. He canceled the milk and newspaper deliveries to the house and told the schools the family was traveling to visit a sick relative. He even left behind a letter explaining his reasons for the crime. The plan worked so well that almost an entire month went by before the bodies were finally discovered, on December 7th, 1971. List had already disappeared without leaving a single trace. He took on a new name, Robert Clark, moved to another state, got a job as an accountant, and even remarried. His new wife knew absolutely nothing about his past. For 18 years, a man who had killed 5 people lived a completely ordinary life without ever being bothered. In 1989, a television show about fugitives aired the case for the whole country. A forensic sculptor made a bust showing how List would have aged after all those years, glasses and all. Millions of people saw it. One of them recognized her own neighbor, the man calling himself Robert Clark. List was arrested 11 days later. The bust even had a scar behind the ear, in exactly the same place as his. In the end, the portrait of that model family was disproved by a face made of clay. Number 18. For almost 40 years, a billboard along a highway in West Virginia displayed photographs of 5 children, with their names, their ages, and one question set in stone. What was their fate? They were the 5 Sodder siblings. On Christmas Eve of 1945, a fire consumed the family's entire house. The children disappeared that night, and in the ashes of the house, not a single bone was left to prove they had died in the fire. The Sodder house in the town of Fayetteville caught fire shortly after midnight on Christmas. George and Jenny Sodder managed to escape with 4 of their children. 5 others, ranging in age from 5 to 14, were left behind and were never seen again by anyone. The whole house burned down in less than an hour. Experts stated that a fire that fast could not possibly have consumed 5 bodies completely. Even so, no human remains were found at the site. Several strange details surrounded that night. The ladder that was always propped against the house had gone missing and was found far away afterward. Both of the family's trucks would not start, as if they had been sabotaged on purpose. A stranger had already warned that the house would burn to ashes. George openly criticized the dictator Mussolini, and that had earned him enemies in the area. The parents never believed their children had died there. They believed they had been taken. That is exactly why they put up the billboard with the photos and offered a reward. The story picked up one more chilling chapter in 1967, when Jenny received in the mail a photograph of a young man who looked far too much like one of the missing children grown up. An investigator went after the lead and disappeared. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the children. Those photos on the billboard are still asking the same question that was there from the beginning. Number 19. The image is a photo booth picture with that harsh, slightly strange light showing a young woman smiling next to a man. The photo was found lying on a table beside the body of an unidentified woman in a motel room in the city of Albuquerque in the United States in June of 1991. The young woman in the photo was the victim herself, and for almost 35 years, nobody in the entire world could say who she was. The woman was found dead in the bathroom of the room, with heroin in her system and no clear signs of foul play. Since she had no identification on her, she became just one more unknown in the police files. The photo left on the table was one of the only leads. In 2021, the man in the image came forward to police after his sister recognized his face in a video. He said her name was Becca and that the two of them had dated for a few weeks in Los Angeles. Even with the nickname in hand, her last name remained a complete mystery. In the end, it was technology that closed the case. In 2026, a genetic genealogy investigation compared her DNA against large databases and traced it to a half-brother. The confirmation finally came. The young woman was Rebecca Malakut, born in 1973 and dead at 18. She was identified on the very day that would have been her birthday. The photo that spent 35 years without a name finally had someone to belong to. Number 20. The photo shows a very thin backpacker smiling for the camera, sitting on the side of an old bus in the middle of Alaska. At first glance, it is just a happy selfie from someone enjoying an adventure. The young man is Chris McCandless, 24 years old, and in this other photo, he's holding up his own farewell note, emaciated, starving to death. It was one of the last records of him alive in this world. In 1990, fresh out of college, Chris gave away all of his savings and hit the road, determined to live far away from society. In April of 1992, he walked into the Alaskan backcountry and settled into an abandoned bus near Denali Park. He lived there for roughly 113 days, hunting and living off the little the land gave him. When he tried to leave in July, he found the river he had crossed swollen and impassable. He was trapped in the wilderness. Starving and out of strength, Chris left a note asking for help, taped to the window of the bus. He also wrote a farewell, saying he had had a happy life and thanking God for it. Then he took that photo of himself, waving with the paper in his hand. He died in the middle of August of 1992, weighing about 66 pounds. His body was not found by hunters until September.